My name is Lauren Mitchell. On my 32nd birthday, I came home with a small birthday cake I bought for myself, only to find a suitcase already packed and a card with just 3 words: happy, goodbye. No hug, no wishes, no one asked me to stay. My father stood at the doorway, looked me straight in the eye, and said coldly, "We've agreed. Tonight, you're no longer staying here." And my mother, she just stood there in silence, eyes avoiding mine like I was some stranger who had overstayed her welcome in the house I once fought so hard to belong to. I had paid the electric bills, the water, fixed the roof, covered Mom's prescriptions, helped Troy with his debts. But in the end, they still cast me out like I was freeloading. Have you ever given everything you had to your family, only to be pushed aside like you were never part of them? Share your story in the comments, and if this one speaks to you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because I'm about to tell you something my family never wanted the world to know. I was the only one in my house who still had a job after the pandemic swept through our small town. While our neighbors were losing their jobs, putting foreclosure signs on their lawns, and struggling under mounting debt, I picked up extra hours, took on more freelance accounting work, just to keep our roof from caving in. I didn't go out, I didn't travel, I didn't buy anything for myself except cheap sneakers and a few cans of soup in the fridge. But every month, I paid the utility bills, the insurance for Mom's beat-up Camry, and the mortgage on the house my dad always called a family legacy. Back then, I didn't keep count. I thought, this is what a daughter is supposed to do. When Mom's blood pressure spiked, I skipped a weekend shift to take her to the doctor. When the air conditioner broke in the middle of July, I called a technician to fix it that same day and paid nearly $800 up front. No one asked where I got the money. No one ever thought to pay me back. They just said, family favors shouldn't be written down. And that was it, as if I hadn't carried the weight of that house on my back. Troy, my younger brother, had dropped out of school because it was too much pressure. He stayed in his room most days, didn't work, woke up around noon, played video games all night, and constantly asked me to transfer money to his personal account for some important coding course or laptop repairs. Once, I refused to send it. That night, Mom stood outside my bedroom door, her hand clutching her chest, and said in a soft voice I'll never forget, "My son is trying so hard, and you're just going to abandon him? Doesn't that hurt your heart?" I didn't answer. I opened my wallet, took out my card, and sent the money like a machine. Eventually, I stopped keeping track. What was the point? Every time I mentioned money, they'd look at me like I had just insulted the family name. They called me selfish. They said I acted like I wasn't one of them. And the worst was when Mom looked me straight in the eye and said, "If helping this family is such a burden, why don't you just move out?" But if I left, who would take care of the bills piling up on the kitchen counter? Who would pay for her heart medication when Medicare only covered half? Who would buy Troy's summer textbooks when he once again promised, "This year, I'm serious about getting certified"? I told myself I was helping, that I was protecting something that mattered. But I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel loved. I felt drained. One night, I came home late after turning in a quarterly report to a major client. They'd kept me to discuss a new contract, but all I could think about was rushing to the store before it closed. Our fridge was nearly empty. Carrying 2 heavy bags of groceries, I walked past the living room and heard Troy laughing loudly. He was live streaming his game, reading comments and joking. My sister's like an ATM, always full, never says no. Kinda convenient, honestly. I stood there for a long moment, frozen. The bags started to slip from my hands. The next morning, I told my father, "I think we need to reorganize how expenses are split around the house." He lowered his paper and looked at me with disdain. "You're nickel and diming your own family? You live here, eat here. Who else do you think is supposed to pay? Or are you planning to take your money and let us starve?" I stood there, swallowing everything I wanted to say. I wanted to scream about how much I had spent, how many things I had given up. But I knew the moment I listed the bills, the sacrifices, they'd call me petty. They'd say, "Money can't buy love." That line used to soften me. Now it felt like a velvet noose, tightening with every favor I did in silence. They called it family. I called it captivity. Held in place by guilt, by fear, by one-sided duty that no one acknowledged. I don't remember exactly when I stopped sleeping. Maybe it was last winter, when I had to skip lunch for a week to afford roof repairs after the snowstorm. Or maybe it was when I realized that every time Troy said thank you, it came with a new request. Either way, I lay awake most nights, staring at the peeling ceiling, thinking about a life where no one needed me, unless they needed something. A life where I wasn't a backup plan, a provider, just a person, loved for who I was. But that life never existed in that house. And then came my birthday, and they made it clear. There was nothing left to hold on to. No place left for me in a family I had fought so hard to keep whole. That night, I heard Troy bragging on the phone to someone. He laughed, loud and shameless. The old man finally handed over the 2014 Camry. Guess he was just waiting for her to move out. I stood frozen on the stairs, half-finished glass of water in hand, a hole opening in my chest. That was the car Mom used to get to the hospital, the only reliable vehicle in the house. The one I paid to fix last year when the transmission failed. And now it was a reward for someone who'd done nothing but demand. The next morning, I confronted Mom. You really gave Troy the car? And why wasn't I invited to Saturday's family party? She didn't look at me. She was peeling apples at the kitchen table, hands moving steadily, quietly. After a long pause, she replied so softly I barely heard. Troy needs a start. You already have a job. You're doing fine. I sat down, keeping my voice level. Having a job doesn't mean I don't need to feel cared for. I'm your daughter, too. She stopped slicing, turned her back. I couldn't tell if she was hiding something or just avoiding the truth. Everything has a reason, she said, then walked away, leaving the apples behind. Reason was their word for every unfair decision. Reason was how they turned me into an outsider without ever saying it out loud. I thought of the family gatherings I wasn't invited to. The Christmas gifts neatly wrapped for Troy and the cousins. Well, I got an empty envelope. So you can pick what you want. I remember Dad once telling a room full of people, Lauren can handle herself. The others need help, as if working hard and being independent was my ticket out of belonging. Everything started to make sense. Being left out of the family group chats, hearing about parties only after they happened through Facebook photos, the vague texts like, we figured you were busy, so we didn't call. Turns out, I had been out of the circle for a long time. They only kept me around because I was still paying. I stood there, staring at the kitchen sink full of unwashed dishes. Part of me wanted to clean them like I always did, but another part, the one I'd buried for years, was surfacing. The part that was tired. The part that had had enough. That afternoon, I went back to my room and pulled out my old expense journal. I never asked for anything in return, but I kept notes. I looked at the lines I had written. Mom's meds, $68.40. House insurance, $512. New tires, $436. Troy's course books, $129. Over the last 3 years, I had spent nearly $27,000 on that house. I stared at the number, cold sinking into my chest. Not because I regretted it, but because I realized I had paid that much just to earn a place in a family that no longer considered me their own. I used to think if I tried hard enough, they would understand. If I kept sacrificing, they would see me. But the truth was, they weren't blind. They just didn't want to look. The next day, I walked into the kitchen and saw Troy twirling the new car keys around his finger like a toy. My dad sat at the table, reading the newspaper as always, never glancing up. You really planning to move out? He asked, emotionless. I looked at him and nodded. Yeah, probably soon. He didn't respond, just turned the page. No one asked where I would go. No one asked what I needed. Mom rinsed her teacup and walked upstairs. The silence in that house was so loud I could hear the ticking clock on the wall. I stepped out onto the porch and sat on the wooden chair I'd repainted last summer. The early fall breeze brushed through my hair. I looked up at the pale gray sky. No party invitation, no car for me, not even a thank you for the years I held everything together. I wasn't a daughter. I was a sponsor. And I was beginning to understand no one can keep using you unless you let them. That dinner felt like breathing in a room with no air. The only sounds at the table were the clinking of cutlery, the soft taps of Troy on his phone, and Mom's quiet sighs each time Dad turned a page of the newspaper. I chewed slowly, the cold meat in my mouth like a stone. No one asked how my day was. No one mentioned a belated birthday. No one acknowledged that I had just closed a major contract that helped boost the company's quarterly revenue by more than 30%. Everything I was, everything I tried to be, completely invisible in that house. Just as I finished clearing my plate and stood to return to my room, my father pushed back his chair and walked toward me, carrying an old reddish-brown suitcase. He set it down in the middle of the living room, his eyes on me like I was a burden that needed removing. "We've said enough," he stated, firm and flat. "You're a weight. You won't be sleeping here tonight." I looked at the suitcase, then at the three people in front of me. Dad stood tall, arms crossed. Mom sat on the couch, face turned away, pretending to study the wrinkled curtain, but really just avoiding my gaze. Troy didn't even bother to fake politeness. He smirked, took another bite of pizza, and mumbled, "Finally moving out, huh?" I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Every sentence jammed in my throat, each breath cutting sharp into my chest. But my legs carried me forward without trembling. I pulled out my wallet and took out the old set of keys I'd had since I was 19. Keys to the back door, front door, and even the garage lock. I placed them on the table. The metal hitting the wood made a quiet clink, like the final period in a sentence. No one asked where I'd go. No one tried to stop me. No one showed anything but the clear relief on Dad's face. I looked down at the suitcase. It was cheap, the leather peeling near the handle, the same one I'd dragged around to conferences and business trips. But this time, it wasn't packed with knowledge, documents, or presentations. It carried what was left of me. Shreds of dignity, unanswered questions, and the memories of a daughter who was never enough. I turned and left. No coat, no extra bag, just my purse. I knew that if I paused even a second, I'd cry, I'd beg, I'd do something I'd regret. So I kept walking. The door closed behind me with a dry, hollow thud. Slow, final, like the curtain falling on a long play where I was never even listed in the cast. It was colder than I expected. Night had fallen fast, and the dim streetlights stretched my shadow along the empty sidewalk. I walked slowly, trying not to shiver. My phone stayed silent in my bag. No missed calls, no texts, asking if I was okay. Some small part of me still hoped, foolishly, that Mom would run out after me, tell me not to leave, or at least look out the window with regret. But no one followed. It took me nearly 12 minutes to walk to Amanda's place. When she opened the door and saw my face, she just let out a quiet breath. She didn't ask anything. She just pulled me into the kitchen and poured a mug of hot tea. I didn't have to explain. She already knew. She was the only one who had ever seen me answering client emails while searching for Mom's prescriptions. The one who once asked, "Why does it feel like Lauren never has space in her own home?" I sat in Amanda's small kitchen, hands around the mug, staring into nothing, feeling like I was sinking. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was just hollow, like I'd lost something I couldn't name. Not a place to live, not comfort, but a sense of belonging. The feeling I thought I had turned out to be nothing more than a thin coat of paint covering rotten walls. In that moment, I knew they hadn't kicked me out impulsively. They'd prepared, they'd talked it over, they'd planned. Today was simply the chosen date to end my role, the nameless, titleless role that had carried the whole family for years. I closed my eyes, the steam from the tea warming my face, and whispered to myself, maybe I'd already been cut out of the family long ago. Today, they just finally said it out loud. I woke up in the middle of the night, not because of noise, but because of the crushing silence in a room that wasn't mine. Amanda had given me the spare bedroom with fresh sheets, white curtains, and a gentle nightlight. Still, my chest felt tight, like I'd dragged the entire old house in here with me. I stared at the ceiling for a while, then quietly got up and opened my laptop beside my purse. The glow lit up my face, highlighting the dark circles beneath my eyes from too many sleepless nights. I wasn't looking for revenge, I just needed to cut loose, like when a doctor has to remove what's already rotting to save the healthy parts. I logged into every utility account, electricity, water, internet, gas, all of them in my name. Every contract signed by me, every bill paid by me. No one else had wanted the responsibility. They were afraid of the paperwork, so I had taken it on. Now I was letting it go. One by one, I canceled them. My hand didn't tremble. It felt like untying knots that had choked me for years. The electric company's portal confirmed the disconnection request would take effect tomorrow. I clicked confirm. Water scheduled to shut off at 7 a.m. Internet canceled automatically after I removed my payment method. I saw Mom's name still listed under secondary user. I deleted it without hesitation. Next, I logged into the shared bank account, the one Mom once said was for emergencies, and told me, "You're the most reliable, sweetie. Better you than your dad." I used to feel honored. Now I felt naive. I transferred the remaining balance to my private account, then called the bank and requested a full lock on outgoing transactions. When they asked why, I said to protect my personal funds after leaving a household. Then came the joint savings account. It was the emergency cushion I'd built for the family. When Mom fell down the stairs, I used that money to hire short-term help. When Troy broke his phone and said he needed it to contact a professor, I bought him a new one. Dad never asked about the balance. He just assumed I'd handle it. I opened the settings and clicked Freeze Account. A pop-up appeared. This action will prevent any user from withdrawing funds without full authorization. I entered my password, confirmed, and watched the words appear. Account successfully frozen. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt empty. Like I had finally swept away the last trace of myself from a place I no longer called home. I remember the day Mom held my hand and said, "Without you, I wouldn't know how to survive." Back then, I thought I was her anchor. Now I realized I was the financial plan. They didn't keep me because they loved me. They kept me because I was useful. I kept going. Car insurance. Both Mom's and Troy's vehicles were on my policy. I'd bundled them with mine to get a lower rate. I canceled their cars, kept only mine. Then, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, even the high-speed internet plan, everything I had signed up for, everything they use daily without ever asking about the bill. I canceled them all. Unlinked the address. Removed my card. Revoked access. Each action was a clean slice. Precise. Final. I glanced at the corner of my screen. It was 2:13 a.m. Amanda was still asleep. I closed my laptop, sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Outside, the soft light from the window filtered in like the night itself was holding its breath. I pulled out a small notebook from my bag. The one where I used to write grocery lists, Mom's doctor appointments, Troy's online class schedule. I flipped through the neat handwriting until I reached a blank page. I started writing not tasks, but a list of what I had just removed. Each service, each bill, each burden they'd now have to face on their own come morning. A breeze came through the window, carrying the early chill of fall. I shivered, but didn't reach for a blanket. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about a due date. I wasn't bracing for a declined card because Mom forgot to deposit funds. I wasn't postponing my smallest dreams to cover someone else's last-minute needs. I closed the notebook, set it on the nightstand, and lay down, blanket pulled to my shoulders. There was still a hollow space inside me, but in that space, I wasn't lost. There was only one question now, hanging in the silence. Tomorrow morning, when they turn on the faucet, flip a switch, or try to order their usual from the internet, what will they think when everything vanishes exactly the way they treated me? Quiet, without warning, without explanation, with no one left to stop it. The next morning, before the sunlight fully reached through the sheer curtains, my phone started buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. The soft vibration over and over, like someone trying to jolt awake the part of me that had tried to stay numb. I opened my eyes, still groggy from too little sleep, and grabbed the phone. 18 missed calls, almost half from Mom. The rest from a mix of familiar and unknown numbers, a few showing names of relatives from town. One text came in last, just a single line. "There must be a mistake. You couldn't just abandon your parents like this. Call me." I sat up, back resting against the cold wall, the screen's dim light casting shadows on my worn-out face. That message wasn't an apology. It wasn't acknowledgement. It wasn't understanding. It was a demand. They weren't asking if I was okay. They just couldn't stand the fact that they no longer had control. An hour later, Amanda opened the door and stepped into the room, a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She sat on the edge of the bed, set the mug on the table, and held the screen out toward me. "You should see this." It was a public Facebook post from my father, shared in the Ashridge Town Community Group, the kind of place where people usually ask if someone's found a lost cat or want to sell an old table. But now I was the one being circulated. His profile photo, an old picture of him in uniform, stern and authoritative. The post was worded with calculated heartbreak. "My daughter ran away from home and took the entire savings we spent years building. Our family is now in crisis after an unimaginable betrayal. Please pray for us during this difficult time." Not a single word about who paid those bills. Not one mention of who had taken on their debts for years. Just a twisted story, painting me as the cold-hearted, ungrateful traitor. I curled up, set the phone down on the pillow, my heart racing. It wasn't anger. It was shock, like staring into a mirror and seeing someone had scribbled over your reflection with a cruel, heavy hand. I sat motionless as notifications started flooding in. Messenger, old group chats, messages from people I once trusted. Some sent the post and asked, "What's going on?" Others were blunt. "Lauren, how could you do that to your parents?" A few came from the very people I thought knew me best. "They raised you, doesn't that count for something?" I went downstairs and found a quiet corner by the window, somewhere out of Amanda's sympathetic gaze, somewhere I could try to steady myself. Outside, the sunlight had risen gently, kids biked past like nothing had changed. But I knew better. In this town, news traveled faster than the wind. If my dad had already posted on Facebook, Sunday morning at church would be full of whispers. The grocery store, the coffee shop on the corner, even the gas station where people gathered early. By now, I was the topic being picked apart. I used to think that if I disappeared quietly enough, if I left without hurting anyone, they would let me go. But they didn't need me present. They just needed me in the background. And when that background vanished, they had to write a new script. And naturally, I was the villain. By noon, my phone rang again. It was the landline from home. I didn't answer. I just watched the screen light up and wait for it to stop. A minute later, a message from my mother appeared. "No one in town believes me anymore. Are you satisfied now? Your father is falling apart. I hope you still have some conscience left." I read that line over and over, a wave of sorrow rising in my chest. No one asked why everything fell apart overnight. No one wondered why all the bills were in my name. They didn't want the truth. They just needed someone to blame so their image would stay intact. That afternoon, after Amanda left for work, I stayed in the apartment alone. I opened my laptop and typed my name into Facebook. The comments started scrolling in. Some defended me, but most condemned. One person wrote, "With a daughter like that, I don't know what family even means anymore." Another tagged me, "Where are you? Do you even know what your parents are going through?" I didn't reply to anyone. I just closed the browser, shut the laptop, and sat in the soft, fading light of evening. Not angry, just certain. More certain than ever that when truth is twisted by familiar mouths, people will always choose to believe the version that makes them feel better. And in that version, I wasn't the devoted daughter. I was the heartless betrayer. I sat at Amanda's desk, the laptop open in front of me, the screen casting a dull glow on my face, thinner, paler, and no longer dodging the truth. Around me, the apartment was as quiet as always, just the hum of the washing machine in the corner and the golden light streaming through the blinds. But inside me, something was shifting. Not rage, not a hope to be cleared, just the sense that the truth needed to be put back in its rightful place. I opened the folders I had saved. Thousands of files. Photos of utility bills, roof repair invoices after a storm, receipts for mom's medication, tuition confirmations for Troy's online classes, 4 years of bank statements, every number, every timestamp, every note I'd written to help keep track. Now pieces of a portrait that had been distorted for too long. None of it was made up. I just never said it out loud. I selected each file, sorted them into one folder titled simply The Truth. No flair, no subtext. Then I wrote. Just a few short paragraphs. No yelling, no blame, no plea for sympathy, just facts. Verifiable, documented, dated. I explained that I was the sole name on every utility contract, that the savings they built over years came largely from my extra shifts, from canceling summer trips to fix plumbing or pay for home maintenance. I posted a photo of the leaking roof I once patched with my own hands because we couldn't afford a contractor, the handwritten note from Mom thanking me for the space heater during a record cold snap, the email from an online university confirming that Troy's tuition had been paid with my card. In the last line, I wrote, I don't need anyone to defend me. I just hope someone understands. Sometimes the one who walks away isn't the traitor. They're the one who was left behind long before anyone noticed. I hit post. At first, only a few people saw it. An old classmate shared it and added, I remember seeing Lauren working 2 jobs and still checking in on her mom every week. A neighbor commented. She was the only one on our block up at 5 a.m. shoveling snow for her own yard and her parents. Then a longtime mail carrier who delivered to our house for nearly a decade chimed in. I remember clearly. She was always the one to come get the mail, even in the snow. No one else in that house ever said thank you. The shares started climbing. One by one, people added their quiet memories, things they'd witnessed but never said aloud. A shop clerk from the corner store wrote, she bought her mom a heater in the coldest week of winter, wearing just a thin coat and paying in small bills. A bus driver posted, she'd carry 2 full bags of groceries every week. Her brother only came out to grab his drink, never offered to help. I didn't respond to any of the comments. I just sat there, letting others speak for me, with truths so honest, no one could deny them. When Amanda came home from work, she stepped into the room, dropped her bag, and looked at me. Did you do something? I turned and nodded slowly. I just shared what I lived. She was quiet for a moment, then reached out and held my hand, gently, as if trying to hold on to the parts of me that still hadn't been broken by the storm outside. That night, the post kept spreading, but this time the criticism was gone. The people who had stayed silent now began to ask questions. Why were they blaming Lauren when the proof is so clear? She's the one who was used, not them. No one needed me to cry to believe me. I didn't have to play the victim. The truth, when it shines bright enough, carries its own weight. And when lies are dragged into the light, they shatter all on their own. 3 days after I posted, a thick envelope arrived at Amanda's apartment, addressed to me. The sender, Whitley & Co. Law Offices, the same firm our family once hired to handle Grandpa's estate paperwork. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a neatly printed legal document, beginning with a cold salutation. Notice of lawsuit. The list of accusations claimed I had misappropriated joint family assets, abused trust, and even included charges of emotional and financial elder abuse. I flipped through the pages, reading words carefully chosen to turn every sacrifice I had made into manipulation, every payment into coercive behavior, and every moment I had quietly endured into controlling intent. My throat tightened, not out of fear, but grief. I thought I had nothing left to lose, but somehow they still found a way to wound me again, this time with words sharpened by legal ink and sealed with a red stamp of authority. Amanda sat beside me, silent for a moment, then said, "We're not going to sit here and let them slander you. You have everything in your hands. It's time to fight back. For real." That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with a legal aid office in Columbus, nearly a 2-hour drive from town. They received me professionally, but their eyes betrayed genuine disbelief as I laid it all out. I opened my laptop, clicked through folders, and showed them every piece of evidence I had collected and organized. From bank statements, utility contracts, bills, photos of repairs I paid for, audio recordings of my mom asking me to cover medical bills, to handwritten thank you notes from Troy after I helped him get out of credit card debt. Twice. A young attorney named Clara took notes quietly throughout the meeting. When I finished, she looked up, her expression steady and certain. "You don't just have enough evidence to disprove these accusations, Lauren. In fact, this is a textbook case of familial financial abuse. You have every right to file a countersuit, and you could win." I went still. No one had ever told me that what I endured was wrong, that it wasn't just meaningless sacrifice, but a form of exploitation masked as family duty. Clara continued, "We'll file a counterclaim based on long-term financial abuse disguised as familial obligation. They used blood ties to extract labor, money, time, and compassion from you for years. This is absolutely something the law can address." I signed the power of attorney with a mixture of relief and ache. In my memories, I still saw my father holding my hand on a dirt road when I was in preschool, my mother combing my hair in the bathroom during those long summer blackouts. But those beautiful memories couldn't erase the truth, that they used the love I had for them to bind me into a role I could never escape, until I was forced to walk away. By the time I returned to Amanda's, dusk had settled. She greeted me with a quiet hug. No words. We ate dinner in silence, then sat side by side, reviewing the case files again. Amanda helped me organize the photos, label the documents, and rewrite captions for each piece of evidence. She didn't ask about my family, didn't comment on the vicious accusations. Her hands just kept working, as if, with each careful gesture, she was stitching together the pieces of my self-worth that had been torn apart. That night, I sat alone in the living room, watching the glow from apartment windows across the street. Outside was a small world where people went to bed after long days, where every family had arguments but somehow found their way back to the table. I used to think mine was like that too, that the hurt was temporary. But some wounds are too deep to close when the hand that inflicted them still denies they ever cut you. I looked at the stack of files on the table, pages marked by the years I lived in silence. Now they would speak for me, not out of vengeance, but to prove I existed, that the sacrifices were real, and that I, Lauren Mitchell, was done being quiet. The courtroom wasn't large, but every breath, every page turn, every tap of a pen on the desk echoed. I sat on one side, across from Clara, the young attorney who had listened to my story not just with belief, but with understanding. On the other side, my father wore a crisp white shirt, but it didn't hide the tight fists resting on his knees, the veins in his arms standing out. My mother sat next to him, eyes averted. Troy sat behind them, head down, missing that smug slouch he always wore. The judge began with a calm voice, asking both sides to present their opening statements. Their attorney didn't say much. He opened with, "Due to emotional complexities within the family," then wrapped up in under 3 minutes. No evidence, no rebuttals to the thick file of documentation I had submitted. When it was our turn, Clara stood and delivered a concise, firm argument. She didn't use harsh words. She simply presented each bank statement, each payment confirmation, each photo of property I had quietly repaired using my own time and money. When she laid down the transfer log showing regular payments to Troy, the courtroom fell into stillness. The numbers appeared month after month, $300, $400, sometimes $700. The recipient, Troy Mitchell. Notes: tuition, equipment, personal assistance. Every transfer I'd logged not for protection, but out of habit. Now they stood as my shield against yet another lie. Troy didn't speak. He just sat there, hands clasped, staring at the floor. When the judge asked if he disputed receiving the funds, he shook his head and murmured, "No." My mother leaned toward him slightly, but he looked away from her. My father, the same man who had told the entire neighborhood that I stole from the family, never spoke either. He stared straight ahead, brow furrowed, temples flushed. I saw his fingers twitch, like he was struggling to keep something down. But he said nothing. Not one word to defend the lies they had told. After both sides presented, Clara submitted the official counterclaim, along with evidence supporting a request to investigate financial abuse within the family. It wasn't a dramatic move, but it was enough to shake them. As Clara mentioned the possibility of a formal investigation if the case continued, my mother leaned toward my father and whispered something. Minutes later, their attorney requested a private conference. It lasted less than 10 minutes, but to me it felt like a slow dissection of memory. I thought of the day I signed my mother's health insurance form, listing myself as the primary payer because she was afraid she'd mess up the paperwork. I remembered guiding Troy into a pharmacy, holding him up when he was too drunk to walk. I had never asked for thanks, never expected to speak about any of it in court, but now it was all there, as evidence, not for revenge, just to show I had lived with love, even if they hadn't. When they returned, the motion to withdraw the lawsuit came simply and without explanation. No reason, no apology, just, for personal reasons and to avoid further harm to both parties, we are withdrawing the claim. The judge nodded, recorded the decision, and brought the gavel down with one clean final knock. I stood. My legs didn't shake, my back didn't bend. My mother stayed slightly behind, eyes red. I looked at her, not hoping, not waiting for an embrace or understanding, just with the clarity of someone who finally knew where the story ended. My father didn't look back. He walked straight to the door, dragging my mother along. Troy followed quietly, as if even touching someone else would burn him. I stepped outside the courthouse and took a deep breath. The sky was startlingly blue, like someone had painted it fresh after a long storm. I walked along the old stone hallway, down the dark brick steps. What I felt wasn't relief, it was clarity. For the first time in my life, I left without guilt. I was no longer the daughter who beat herself up for setting boundaries. No longer the silent one paying the bills while whispering, "Well, it's family." It was just me, carrying no title, no debt, no expectations of being comforted. I paused at the last step, turned to glance at the building that had once trapped me under the weight of invisible obligations, blood, expectation, twisted love. Then I turned forward and walked away, light, as if my feet finally remembered what it felt like to not be held back by anything. I moved into my new apartment on a gray morning, the wind slipping through the trees lining the street like it was quietly reminding me of a season that had already passed. The apartment had just 2 small rooms, beige walls, a slightly scratched but clean hardwood floor, and a window that faced the setting sun. I rented it from an elderly widow named Helen, who approved my application not because of my stable income, but because your eyes look just like my daughter's the day she left home. I started over with small things. A secondhand wooden table I found at a flea market, some white curtains Amanda helped me sew, a vase of dried lavender I put together from discounted stems at the farmer's market. Every corner of the home bore the quiet imprint of someone learning to choose her own pieces, no longer forced to fit into someone else's plan. I hung photos I'd taken during quick freelance trips, golden wheat fields, a blazing purple sky over Montana, and one of me smiling beside a Christmas tree I built myself when I was 28. The year my family forgot my birthday, and I celebrated alone with a mini oven cake. Each morning, I brewed my coffee, opened the window to let the light in, and didn't have to wait my turn to use the bathroom before work. I no longer checked my bank account in fear of unauthorized withdrawals. I didn't hear yelling from the living room when a bill showed up and no one wanted to take responsibility. Silence, once a mask for pain, now felt like something honest, peaceful in its simplicity. One weekend afternoon, just after I'd hung an old wall clock, a piece I found in Amanda's storage, no longer ticking but with the glass still intact, I noticed a postcard slipped under the door. No postmark, no return address, just a thick ivory card with neat handwriting that read, "People fear those they can't control. You lived rightly." I stared at the line, something inside my chest sinking, then softening. No signature, no identifying mark. But I didn't need one. I knew it wasn't an apology from my old family or a hidden message of regret. It was a voice from somewhere out there, someone who had watched, understood, and quietly bore witness. And sometimes, that's all a survivor's heart needs to feel a little less tight. I placed the postcard on my bookshelf, right next to something I had once hesitated to keep. A tiny birthday cake made of clay, painted soft cream with a single crooked candle in the center. I made it when I was 29, after my birthday was canceled because the family was dealing with Troy's situation. I used to want to throw it away, but now I dusted it off and set it upright, like a marker, not of pain, but of how far I've come. I sank into the single armchair, a hot cup of tea in my hands, soft jazz playing from the small radio in the corner. Night settled slowly outside the window, apartment lights flicking on one by one across the street, other people's lives continuing in their own ways. And I, in this small room, was no longer the one keeping the fire burning for someone else. I was learning to keep myself warm. I was no longer part of the place that once called itself my family, but I was becoming whole in the quiet little world I was building with my own two hands. I'm not telling this story to complain. I'm telling it because I know there are more people like me out there than we care to admit. People forced to grow up too soon, carrying roles they never asked for, bearing silent wounds with no names, all in the name of family. Have you ever felt like that? Endured in silence, afraid of hurting someone else, questioning if you were wrong to finally choose yourself? If you have, I want you to know you are not alone. And if you're willing, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. I'll read it, and I believe someone else will see themselves in your words, just as you may have seen yourself in mine. If you want to keep following real stories, the kind you can only whisper in the dark, but that somehow light up someone else's heart, click follow, because I still have so much left to say. More stories about family, about choice, about loss and becoming. And somewhere in those pieces you might just find yourself, too.